Resuming debate.
The honourable member for Oxford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's always a tough act to follow after we had a great intervention from my colleague from Quebec. Mr. Speaker, as a proud son of immigrants, I've seen that struggle at home personally. My parents chose Canada about 40 years ago. They came to this country with not much in their pockets. Blue-collar, working-class family. My dad worked at the same factory for about 30 years. And growing up, I didn't get a chance to see him home. He would leave 2 in the morning. He would come back at 8 p.m. And as a young father myself, I understand now how hard that sacrifice is. He made that sacrifice for me, for that next generation. Because Canada had a promise that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you can achieve that Canadian dream, that dream of home ownership, where you could buy a decent home in a safe neighborhood, where you could go on a vacation once in a while. You know, that sacrifice that my dad made, Canadians are making that every single day. They're working harder and harder in the hope that the next generation will do better than the previous. But sadly, after 9 years of the Liberal NDP government, we're starting to see that hope slip away. That Canadian dream, that Canadian promise that so many have fought hard for is starting to leave our country. Madam Speaker, we have we have the worst economic crisis in my lifetime, in the last 40 years. You know, we have 2 million Canadians lining up at food banks. 1,400 tent cities are being popped up across our province alone, 25 in Oxford County. That was never the case, Mr. Speaker. That never happened before, Mr. Speaker. 2 million food banks visits in a single month? That's not the Canadian dream my parents came to. That's not the Canadian dream Canadians want to live today. And how do you make it worse? The Liberal policies make it worse. They brought in the carbon tax. A carbon tax that punishes our farmers who are feeding our families. They're punishing our truckers who ship our food and product in our country. It's going to cost our farmers $1 billion. It's going to cost our truckers $4 billion. It's going to put over $30 billion blow to our GDP in our economy. It's simple. When you tax the farmer who grows the food and you tax the trucker who ships the food, you punish all Canadians who buy the food. And then they have this new capital gains tax hike. They're taxing our farmers when we have a food crisis. They're taxing our doctors when we have a doctor shortage crisis. And they're taxing our home builders when we have a national home building crisis. Just yesterday, Jack Mintz put an article out projecting that their capital gains tax hike will take away 414,000 jobs from our Canadian economy and blow $90 billion from our GDP. That is devastating, Mr. Speaker. And these tax policies are hurting our housing policies. Housing costs have doubled. Mortgage payments have doubled. Rent has doubled. The amount needed for a down payment has doubled. More and more young Canadians, that next generation I spoke about, are now being forced not to buy homes. They're staying with their parents in their basements. That dream of home ownership is starting to fade away. In 2022, we built fewer homes than we did in 1972, and we had half the population. Their plan is not working. And if you manage to buy a home or rent a home, look at the neighborhoods of what's happening in our streets. There's crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder right across our communities. After 9 years of Liberal NDP government, we are seeing a 50% increase in crime, in violent crime. Extortions are up. Auto theft is up. In Oxford, in Woodstock, a safe neighborhood, a family neighborhood with lots of parks, lots of children. A few weeks ago, we had a drive-by shooting at a home there. We've never seen that before. We are seeing 47,000 Canadians die from opioid drug overdoses since they have taken power of our country. They have unleashed a wave of crime, chaos, and drugs in our streets. Instead of investing in treatment and bringing your loved ones home drug-free, they're supporting radical drug policies that are giving government-funded meth, crack, and other drugs in vending machines to the public. That is not the Canadian dream that my parents came to this country for, Mr. Speaker. And the sad thing is this. We have been seeing this every single day now. The NDP partners a few days...
Well, we have a point of order from the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
I don't think we have quorum in the House right now, Mr. Speaker.
Let's start the count.
How many's quorum? 20. Some of them were in the bathroom, I guess. On video, John?
Okay, let me look at the table. I know what my count was.
No, that's only your guys' unit.
God help us if that ever.
Yeah, she's Brentson.
I didn't count 20. We're good. All right, thank you for the quorum. The Honourable Member for Oxford. You have about 4 minutes and 20 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And look, it's their policies, their catch and release policies, Bill C-75, Bill C-5, that have released our criminals back on the streets. It's a revolving door that they created. And my residents tell me every single day that because of the violent crime, they're not safe in their communities anymore. They're afraid to walk on our streets, go to the park with their families. That is not the Canadian dream that my parents came here for. And the sad thing is that the NDP and the Bloc now continue to prop up this government. In my riding, we have a great auto plant, CAMI, GM, great union workers work there, and I met one of them last week where they came up to me and said this. He has voted for the NDP his whole life. He thought the NDP was their party for workers. And he said, not anymore. He'll be voting Conservative for the first time because he knows that the NDP have sold out Canadians when they voted 24 times for the carbon tax. They are killing the jobs of our workers and they've sold out our workers. Our common sense Conservative team will always stand with workers and ensure that we put more food on the table for their families so they can live that Canadian dream, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are now losing hope. We hear it, we see it, we feel it. And the stories we share today are stories of many Canadians. There are friends, there are neighbors, there's that senior, that single mother, just the everyday Canadian trying to survive, to make the sacrifice like my dad did to get ahead in this country, to build a better life for the next generation. And Mr. Speaker, this government has tried extremely hard to divide Canadians. They're pitting one region against the other. They're trying to divide our communities by spreading misinformation and disinformation. But I know that Canadians see through this. There is hope in our country. And what we know is that Canadians are resilient. Our country is strong. And I believe in our country. And the Conservatives believe in our country. And for us, we know that with the right leadership, we can get our country back on track and restore that Canadian promise that my father came to this country for. Yeah. And that is why we're calling for a carbon tax election now. Yeah. You'll have a very, very clear choice between the NDP and liberal costly carbon tax coalition that will tax your food, punish your work, take your money, or a common sense Conservative plan led by our great leader that will axe the tax so Canadians could heat, eat, and house themselves. They could build the homes so our Canadians can have a roof over their head. Fix the budget so they could drive down inflation. And stop the crime so our families can live in safe neighborhoods. A government that will stand with our farmers who feed our families. A government that will stand with lawful gun owners and go after real criminals who are destroying our communities. A government that will put Canadians first. A government that believes in that prosperity of Canada, that believes better is possible, that believes in Canada. And for 9 years, we have not seen that. But Canadians will have a choice, and I call on all parties to call an election. What are they afraid of? Let Canadians decide. That is democracy. And every single day, we will do our job, hold this government accountable. Unlike the other parties have sold out their parties and their base, we'll fight for Canadians every single day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his speech today. In particular, talking about his parents coming to Canada to look for better opportunities. And I think that that's the story of many people in Canada, myself included. My mother is from Italy, my father is from Holland. They immigrated here. I'm a little older than him, I imagine, so they immigrated here about 55 years ago. And they, generations that come here and people that grow up here shape our country. And my mother became a relatively new immigrant, became part of the feminist movement in the late 70s and 80s that fought for women's reproductive rights. My wife gets to benefit from that work that my mother and her generation did fighting for those rights. But now we see members of the Conservative Party who are literally trying to roll back those rights. We see them going to rallies on Parliament Hill that are pro-life rallies. Does he not agree that working and moving backwards is not beneficial for our country, our society, or the people that have helped shape it to this point?
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, they have broken that Canadian dream for newcomers. Yeah. They've created 99 problems, and they haven't been able to fix a single one. Yeah. They are pretending to be firefighters when they're the ones that are causing the fires, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones in charge for the last 9 years. That newcomer dream that you spoke about is gone because of your party. Yep. And so for us, when they're doing all these photo ops and they're announcing these big promises and we're getting nothing in return, who does it hurt the most? Who does the carbon tax hurt the most? Newcomers, new Canadians. Yep. It's this government that's responsible for breaking that Canadian dream.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Griesbach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague for his speech today. He spoke in particular to some of the areas I agree with, which are the story of many Canadians who come to this place, Indigenous land, and they benefit from what is the immaculate power and grace of this great country. But so often, the people of the original Stuarts are misunderstood. Their priorities of trying to get clean water, trying to get good jobs, trying to get social safety that helps every single person achieved has been difficult for Indigenous people. And forgive me if I can't vote in favor of a motion that's a grab power motion for the leader of the opposition just to recreate the pain that so many Indigenous people have had to endure. The last time the Conservatives were in government, they were sued by Indigenous leaders for failing to create a framework for clean water. How shameful is that, Mr. Speaker? What will the member have to say to Indigenous people who can't trust the Conservatives when they've been given so many opportunities to make things right, but continue to let us down?
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question. On this side of the House, we will work to be partners with the Indigenous peoples to make sure that they feel heard loud and clear, but I understand why they don't want to go to an election. Just like Canadians, the NDP is broke as well. They have no money in the party. And just a few months away, I could see their leader salivating for his pension. It's coming up. Just 6 more months. 6 more months, he will get his pension. So they're going to hold on. They could do all the drama they want. They could do all the, we are ripping up the agreement, we're going to fight for Canadians. But yesterday, they propped him up again.
Unbelievable.
So if they have these concerns, fight for Canadians. Be the voice of opposition that you're here to do. The member spoke about this, that he said his job is to fight for Canadians and be a voice. Well, you're missing from action.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
Point of order. I'm just going to let me clean some of that up first. The honourable member knows full well we have to come through the chair, so the use of you or speaking directly to members in the chair in the chamber are not allowed. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay with a point of order.
Absolutely, Speaker, and I just want to follow up because I felt a little intimidated when he pointed at me and said I was missing in action when I'm here. But I look at the leader of the opposition and he's nowhere to be seen. He should be pointing at his leader. But I guess...
Okay, just as usual, the honourable member is always trying to be very helpful. Well, wasn't very helpful there. The questions and comments, the honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the people from Kamloops Thompson Caribou. Before I begin, I just want to recognize a Paralympian in my riding, Greg Stewart, who won gold. I want to commend him on that, and I want to wish him all the best with his fiancée Taylor in their upcoming wedding this weekend. All the best to Greg and Taylor, and congratulations on both fronts. I really appreciate what my colleague was saying. I know that the member for Kingston and the Islands also referenced coming from an immigrant family. Could he elaborate just on coming from an immigrant family, where he sees things going and what he would change if he had the chance?
30 seconds or so, the honourable member for Oxford.
Thank you for that, my honourable colleague, and obviously congratulations to all Paralympians that are competing today, representing our great country on that international stage. And I understand we share a very similar story with our parents making the sacrifice so that we have a better life. The policies of this government have hurt them the most. If you look at the food bank usage, if you look at the jobless numbers that we're seeing today, that what's happening to our country, our community, our economy, it is because of their failed policies. And we're seeing that positive response back right across our country. If you go to the GTA, you go to BC, you go to Surrey, Brampton, Mississauga, Scarborough, Vaughan, people are sick and tired of their failed government. They want a government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming